My name's Grant Downie. I'm Head of Performance for Manchester City's Academy here. I've been here, 4.5 years, and in that time we've really developed the sort of the philosophy and the mission of what we want to try and do with academy players from a performance angle. And performance angle to us is medicine, science and performance analysis. And to that angle, you know, we don't like the idea of sort of individual departments. And if I take medicine as an example, I'm a chartered physiotherapist by profession, but there's a danger we could medicalise all our young players. And our aim is to try and get young players to achieve as much of their potential as possible. So our mission statement is almost in 5 years' time we see City players playing globally around the world that know how to look after mind, body and soul, and we are proud of the football brand. So to that end, our job is always to try and get people to express themselves as young players, understand their body, understand how it works, how they've got to perform sometimes with pain, how they can deal with that, and hopefully maximise their performance. And at the same time remain hopefully a relatively humble person. And so it's about journeys. It's about looking after, my job is to look after the staff who deliver things day to day with players, but look at the overall strategy of how we want to achieve it. So the academy is from 21s down, so from 21s to 6. We also want to join up with a women's team, and we also have a role with the first team from the point of view of ensuring that our practices have got similarities, so the synergies that can join the thing together as one club or as one football group eventually too. Yes, I mean, I've been in this role, as I said, 4.5 years. Previously, I was Head of Sports Medicine and Science for Middlesbrough Football Club, which was first team and academy. I was there for 8 years. I had a similar role before that at Glasgow Rangers for 9 years. And then previously before that I worked for the Football Association for 8 years, running a rehabilitation centre for long-term injured players, where I also worked with gymnasts, which took me to the Olympic Games, Commonwealth Games and other sporting sort of events of that nature. I think the approach is very similar but yet very different. From the point of view with first team players, you are there to win games at all costs to some extent. Not that you will cheat to win, not that you will do anything that is necessarily long-term harm to players, but ultimately you're there to win. And they have a set contract, and when they fulfill it, they leave you. With young players, you're taking them on a journey, so sometimes failure isn't a bad thing. You know, you accept that. With the young players, it's much more educational. You know, probably by 22, 23, it's difficult to influence the sort of education of some senior players. With our young players, we want to have them to have what we call a growth mindset, so we can use education from an injury angle. They still need to be able to perform, they need to still know how to win, but there's a way of achieving both. So there is a difference, particularly because we've got to appreciate that the young mind is an adolescent mind, which means it's a bit like a Ferrari with no brakes. It can be a bit silly, but they're meant to be. And so we've got to take that into account. They're not necessarily going to follow a structured program as maybe a senior player would, just because of their age, their lack of experience. But that's normal for children. Massively. It's I'm a great believer in one of the most important things is to develop as a person. I would suggest that 99.9% of our young scholars are technically gifted players. And we can improve that technique a little, but if we improve the person, the technique will flourish further, because ultimately technique is fine, but ultimately to play in front of 70,000 people and take a penalty to win the Champions League is pressure. So we've got to create a certain person who knows how to switch pressure on, how to switch pressure off. But by developing them as a person, I'm quite convinced we'll make them a better footballer too. The good news is a typical week is not standard in this type of role, but that's one of the things to say about it. I don't start at 9 o'clock in the morning and I don't finish at 5 o'clock. I don't work Monday to Friday. I tend to sometimes work 7 days a week, and then the next week it might be 5. But I can be in here. Normally my day starts with a little bit of exercise for myself, because it's important for my mind to be fresh. So therefore for my well-being, I start with exercise. I get up at 5:45 and come to the gym at 6:15 every day. So for the first hour's for me, but it's for me to get my head ready for work. From 7:15, I'm working, you know, on my own plan of what I need to deliver, not just that day, but what are the long-term objectives. I will generally have about 5 meetings a day with different staff regarding either injury management, performance management, possibly with the academy director. And I will attend matches, not as in a functional capacity to run on as a physiotherapist, but to look at our overall process. How did we achieve, was it not so much the result, but how did we achieve that result? What were the processes like? I do a lot of audit reviews, so you're looking at processes and continually trying to improve them. I also sit on the technical board, so I look at things that when we are developing our young players, are the pathways correct? Could we do them better? So the good news is I don't have a typical week, but it's fitted with a sort of a structure of a lot of things, and you have to, in my job, leave space for what could be the most important thing which may happen. For example, we played an under-18 game last night. If someone's received a fractured tibia, we've got to be able to react with a system that can sort of cope with that with an hour's notice. I think, you know, the challenges here are which football club in the world has ever aspired to produce players that can win a Champions League? And therefore the bar is continually being raised, and that's a fantastic challenge, but it means that we cannot leave one stone unturned in the development of young players, because every marginal gain from everything we do, you know, over a period of time is to sort of get our players to the highest standard. And so it's always looking at pathways and development. Where we're very fortunate, we have a football club and a football group that aspire to achieve this, so they will help us to achieve this by most of the things we want to try. So the fortunate thing is we're backed by the right people. The challenge is the highest possible, but that's what it should be. The most rewarding thing for me in my role is I'm here to develop not only the players but the staff. And there's nothing more rewarding for me than actually going and seeing a project that one of my staff has come to me with and has sort of I've backed for them to go and deliver, and you see the success of it. And even if it fails, it's not failure, it's the fact they've tried something. So the most rewarding aspect of me is seeing people develop. It probably from 11 upwards is fairly standard to about 16, and then from 16 to 21 it sort of gets greater, because then they become full-time scholars. But with our St Bede's programme, where our boys go into private education, and from 11 to 16 we have them on day release, and that will be for tactical, technical, mental and physical development. Some of that is all changed in one programme, but everything we do has a psychological element, even from the gym, the context of the gym to the field. Hence, if you go into our gyms, there's lines you cross, which are performance lines. So we try and contextualise everything. If a player is injured, we'll obviously have a little bit more time from the medical angle. But holistically, you know, we see the players as young people, and if they're injured or not injured, they're still here to be developed. So an injury is just an opportunity to get them either physically, mentally tougher. I think physiotherapy has become much more of a sort of accelerated profession. Previously we would probably, if someone had got a significant ankle injury, we would have put it into plaster for 4 weeks and then gradually mobilised it, and the player would have been out for maybe 10 to 12 weeks, whereas now we would put it in a removable boot, so they're still resting, but we take it off and move it every day. So rather than taking 10 to 12 weeks, they'll probably get back to 6 to 8. You know, it's still difficult to beat pathological healing, but what you can do from a medical aspect is accelerate the healing by not creating the same sort of stiffness as we used to. I think sports science has come massively into its own, and we monitor players much more than we used to. So we monitor things like the amount of training they do, how many sprints they do, so we have a lot more information from that point of view, and we've become much more of a multidisciplinary team, which has got great advantages, but it's also got some disadvantages too. Yeah, absolutely. Listen, we work very closely with the coaches, and one of the things we very early did in this new sort of academy in CFA was we did away with what we call offices for medical staff, sports science staff or coaching staff. Every coach who sits with, for example, the under-18 coach sits next to the under-18 physio, next to the S&C, so the strength and conditioning coach for them, and the performance analysis staff, so they can have daily dialogue about the players. Everything's player-centred. The player sits at the sort of front of the wheel, and everyone feeds into that. So we have to inform coaches when players are injured, you know, how much training we think is recommended, and then there's a good dialogue. And the best way to have that is daily conversations rather than just an email and a flat bit of paper. So really the key of that is the daily dialogue. My job in my head of performance is to relate directly to the technical director, and we discuss the overall planning of the season, when we're going to go on tournaments, when we're not going to go on tournaments, when's the right time to introduce extra loading, when's the right time to give the players off. So we have a real daily dialogue, and you know, ultimately we all say the same mission, which is ultimately to produce players, and ultimately the route to get there is not the same for all.